So who's offering Psalm 27 for Elul before we begin our study today?
I am Judy Frank.
Hi, Judy. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I decided to use somebody different because we hadn't used him in a while.
Okay.
Edward Feld. He does 27.
Beautiful.
So here it goes. I don't know if I have it in front of me. A Davidic Psalm. Adonai is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Adonai is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I dread? When evil people assail me to devour my flesh, it is they, my besiegers and enemies, who stumble and fall. If an army mount against me, my heart would not fear. Should war beset me, in this I would have confidence. A single request would I make of Adonai, that would I seek, that I might live in the house of Adonai all the days of my life, to calmly gaze upon Adonai, to visit his great hall. For were he to conceal me in his hut on an evil day, hide me in the enclosure of his tent, I would be raised as on a high fortress. Now should he raise my head above my enemies round about, I would sacrifice in his tent to trumpet blasts, singing and chanting a hymn to Adonai. Hear my voice as I cry out, Adonai, favor me, answer me. Of you my heart says, seek my face. Adonai, I seek your face. Do not hide your face from me. Do not push aside your servant in anger. You have been my help. Do not forsake me. Do not abandon me, God of my salvation. Though my father and my mother abandon me, Adonai would gather me in. Show me your way, Adonai, and lead me on a straight path despite those ranged against me. Do not subject me to the people who besiege me, for false witnesses and vicious accusers have appeared against me. Had I not trusted that I might see the goodness of Adonai in the land of the living, hope in Adonai. Strengthen yourself, be of courageous heart. Hope in Adonai. That's
Beautiful. Thank you. I just love how everybody's exploring different expressions of Psalm 27. So thank you, Judy, for choosing that one. And today we are going to move into Psalm 30, and we're going to start and end the classes with some musical offerings. The first one we're going to hear today, and I'm going to speak a little bit about it before we do, is Debbie Friedman singing her very, 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 very famous setting of the last, roughly, she uses little bits from the Psalm, but mostly the last two verses of Psalm 30. But Psalm 30, as we've talked about, each Psalm has either a particular category or mixtures of category. Psalm 30 is really in the category, although some of you might argue with me, and I'll be open to that, often considered a Thanksgiving Psalm, a Psalm of gratitude. But there are other ways to look at it as well. And that's certainly the way that Debbie Friedman looks at it. Debbie, for some of you who know, was, along with Shlomo Carlebach, the two of them were really responsible for a whole new version, an American version of setting to music, using the folk idiom of liturgical music. And as I've talked before, it's very accessible because for most Americans, folk music is the musical genre of the 60s, and that's in their heads. And it's very accessible for that reason. It's not any more Jewish or less Jewish than 19th century music that was using classical music settings. And I'm going to ask everybody to please mute yourselves. I don't want to have to go around and mute you. Barbara Grindell, you have to always remember to mute yourself. Okay, I just muted you. It's really important because it's very hard.
Rabbi, I am muted.
I just muted you, Barbara. Barbara, I just muted you. I had to mute you. I'm going around muting people. The ambient noise in your rooms comes through in all different ways to our class. So it's really important for people to do that. Okay, so this is no more accessible than 19th century classical music modes were to Jews from Western and Central Europe, for whom that was the musical setting that was most accessible. So at CBST, we work very hard not to privilege, so to speak, one form of music over another, because that's not Jewish. Jewish has music from all different kinds of genres, all different kinds of forms. So, but what we want to do is to elevate and appreciate all the different ways that Jewish music has explored the cultural norms of music in which Jews lived. So Jews who live in North Africa, the music will sound Arabic because those are the modes of music that Jews in North Africa use to set Jewish prayers to. Jews in Central and Western Europe in the 19th century used Western classical music. And Jews in America in the 60s started exploring using folk music. And Shlomo Carlebach and Debbie Friedman were the two who were at the kind of cutting edge of this movement to take folk settings and to apply Jewish music, Jewish prayers to that music. They wrote their own music, both Shlomo Carlebach and Debbie Friedman. Both of them did something which really we now have come so accustomed to that we don't see it as revolutionary, but when they did it, it was revolutionary, which was to use Hebrew and English in prayer, in a musical setting, so that it wasn't just an English translation, it was integrating Hebrew and English. And Debbie very much loved the Psalms and very much would have appreciated this class that we're doing. And she used a lot of settings from Psalms for a lot of her music. Some of you know that Debbie was a lesbian, but she had to be very closeted in her life because the Reform movement. She was the leading voice for Jewish summer camps and for synagogues. And she knew that had she come out publicly, she would have lost most of her work. So she lived her life like a lot of us did in the 70s, where she had parallel existence, where she lived as a lesbian, but publicly she would not acknowledge that. And that's led to a lot of misunderstanding from people who said it was just privacy. She just wanted to be private. That's totally bullshit. I knew Debbie very well. She knew if she came out, she would have lost all of her employment. She didn't do it because she wanted privacy. She did it like so many people who understood that they would have lost their jobs had they come out. And she stayed in that way to balance out her employment with her personal life. Even when she performed at CBST, she had ambivalence about whether or not, and we never identified her as a lesbian directly when she performed at CBST because she was so concerned about that. Anyway, she died very young, unfortunately, from an autoimmune disease that really took the last 10 years of her life off of her life. And she, even before those 10 years before she died, she was very sick. And we're going to play now her singing her setting for Psalm 30, because I really wanted you, for those of you who never met her personally or saw her perform, to hear her. She was a very charismatic, very, very powerful human being in the world. Her voice is not so great at this point, and she's lost the power. And unfortunately, she was at the peak of her career before there were cell phones and ubiquitous recordings by everybody who would have on their cell phone a video. So we only have very few actual videos of her performing, and not many of them are at her peak. We have, what do you call it? Records. She made a lot of records. They're not her best either, because I don't know, I think that the recording she did in the studio didn't even capture who she was in live performance. And she used a lot of arrangements in her studio performances that I don't think were as good as who she was when she sang live. So it's one of the kind of sad things that we don't have a lot of her recordings of her singing live in a way that would have the quality that really could hear her voice. So we have some recordings when she would sing to 5,000 people, but because they didn't really value and they didn't put the money into the recording equipment, you can't really hear her so well. Do you know what I mean? So we don't really have a lot of great recordings of her at her peak at all. She wrote the Misha Beirach that's become very famous. And as I wrote in the beginning of the Siddur, the whole concept of doing a Misha Beirach in non-Orthodox settings really comes from the gay community, Debbie in particular, but not alone, which really comes out of the AIDS crisis of the 80s. That's when Debbie wrote her Misha Beirach. That's when the whole concept of really focusing on refuah prayers in non-Orthodox settings became really common. And that we really have to give credit to the gay community, which most of the world does not. I do in the introduction. All of those things that Debbie was really at the center of starting was really begun in a response to AIDS. And then it kind of spread out from there. Anything that Debbie would do, she performed constantly in the Reform synagogues and camps. She spread music all over. There are now multiple generations of her students who are now themselves teachers, and now multiple generations of her students. So there are many different now generations. And since she wrote so much music, it's not all great, like any composer. She also didn't read music very well, and she wasn't really classically trained as a musician. And her music shows those weaknesses. So people who are musicians will be very aware that there are some weaknesses in her compositions. However, all of that, next to the charismatic, profound, genius performer she was, melts away. And when she was great, there's nobody who's come close to her. So this is a tribute. Part of what I want to do is make sure that Debbie's memory is alive and active. And there are, if you go onto YouTube, you can find her, and at her funeral, and then for every year for her anniversary of her death, there's a memorial concert. She did a concert many years ago at Carnegie Hall, which a lot of us from CBST went to. Some of you remember there was a huge snowstorm that night, and that was really magical. Yeah, so CDs and albums are where you're going to hear her voice at its best, but it's not at its best. Her live performances were really what she was best at. She was not as good a studio musician and recording artist as she was live. She fed off of the community. She was a religious leader. She wasn't just, so she really fed off of live. So we're going to now hear Debbie Friedman singing her setting from Psalm 30, You Turn My Mourning into Dancing. And you'll notice she uses Hebrew in the setting. And again, that was very new when she and Shlomo Carlebach also started doing that. So we're going to start with this Debbie Friedman of You Turn My Mourning into Dancing Psalm. This is based on roughly verses 11 and 12 of Psalm 30.
Turn my mourning into dancing, so that my soul might sing to you, so that my soul sing to you, and it not be stilled. You turn my mourning into dancing, so that my soul might sing to you, so that my soul sing to you, and it not be stilled. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh Deka. Now I sing praises to the Holy One, who lifts me up when I have fallen. And I cry to you to heal me, and you have answered all my prayers. Now I sing praises to the Holy One, who lifts me up when I have fallen. And I cry to you to heal me, and you have have answered all my prayers. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh dear God, I ask you to be gracious and hear me, Adonai. I called to you to help me, and you supported me with joy. I ask you to be gracious and hear me, Adonai. I called to you to help me, and you supported me with joy. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh dear God, turn my mourning into dancing, so that my soul might sing to you, so that my soul sing to you, and it not be still. You turn my mourning into dancing. You turn my mourning into dancing. You turn my mourning into dancing.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's Debbie Friedman's Psalm 30, and we'll, at the end of this class, we're going to hear the version that Sam and Joyce did a couple of months ago. We have a recording. And yes, that Debbie Friedman did our Pride Shabbat service and a Shabbat Shira concert. She moved to New York some years ago before, about probably 10 years before she died, from Los Angeles, where she lived for many years. I met her in 1985 when she and her partner at the time, who's now a rabbi in upstate New York, organized a conference for gay and lesbian, that's what we called it then, gay and lesbian Jewish rabbis and cantors. And it was a very, how shall we say, closeted event, and we were sworn to secrecy. But 2 years ago, an article came out about it, and people who were there kind of agreed to speak publicly. But Debbie organized that concert again with her partner at the time. And she had just written Lichi Lach. So we heard it before it was actually produced, before it was public. I had it on one of those cassette recordings. We were at her house in Los Angeles. And but I got lost in one of the many moves I've done since 1985. Anyway, so now let's look at Psalm 30. Debbie's Hebrew was excellent, by the way, and she was a Hebraist. She cared deeply about the Hebrew, and so when she would use Hebrew in a song, when she was taking a setting like Psalm 30, she was very careful about the Hebrew she used, and she was thoughtful about it, and she really cared about not just doing stuff in English, but in honoring the Hebrew. So that's why a lot of her songs go back and forth. Misha Berach is a good one. Lichi Lach is an example where she would use the Hebrew back and forth with the English. And again, before she and Shlomo Carlebach started that was very unusual. Now we see it all the time with composers, Jewish music composers, but it was really a radical idea. Okay, so we'll hear more of this setting, which is one of her very famous ones. And so Psalm 30, can we have somebody read it in Hebrew and then the English? Do we have volunteers? Ben Shafran, would you read the Hebrew?
Sure. מזמור שיר חנוכת הבית לדוד. ארוממך אדוני כי דליתני ולא שימחת אויבי לי. אדוני אלוהי, שיבעתי אליך ותרפאני, אדוני העלית מן שאול נפשי, חייתני מיהודי בור. זמרו לאדוני חסידיו והודו לזכר קודשו, כי רגע באפו חיים ברצונו. בערב ילין בכי ולבוקר רינה. ואני אמרתי ושלוי, בל אמות לעולם. אדוני ברצונך אמר תלה הררי עוז. הסתרת פניך הייתי נבהל. אליך אדוני אקרא, ואל אדוני אתחנן. מה בצע בדמי בירדי על שחת? היותך עפר, היגיד עמיתך? שמע אדוני וחנני, אדוני היה עוזר לי. הפכת מספדי למחול, לי פיתחת שקי, ותעזרני שמחה. למען יזמרך כבוד ולא ידום, Adonai Elohai le'olam odecha.
Thank you. So again, so we've about 13, there are 13 verses. Linda Solomon, would you read the English?
Gladly. A psalm, a dedication song for the house of David. I will raise you high, Adonai, for you have pulled me up, and you have not let my enemies rejoice over me. Adonai, my God, I cried out to you, and you healed me. Adonai, you brought me body and spirit up from Sheol. You have kept me alive that I should not plunge into the pit. Sing to Adonai, members of the covenant. Give thanks to God's holy presence, for there is a moment of your anger, a lifetime of your favor. In the evening, crying moves in, but in the morning, song. As for me, I would say when I was prosperous, I shall not ever be shaken. Adonai is pleased you to establish a stronghold on my mountain. Then you hid my face, your face. I was terrified. To you, Adonai, I call. To my superior, I plead for grace. What profit is there in my blood, in my plunging into the pit? Can dust praise you? Can it declare your truth? Listen, Adonai, show graciousness to me. Adonai, be a help to me. You have turned my wail into a waltz for me. You've untied my tatters. You've girded me with joy, so that glory may sing a psalm to you and spare the silence of blood. Adonai, my God, my thanks I give to you forever.
Great. Thank you, Ben and Linda, for reading that beautifully. Now you'll notice, and you're going to hear Debbie Friedman's setting again at the end of this class, and to look at the words that she uses. And again, she focuses on probably 12 and 13, the last two, not 11 and 12, but 12 and 13. But you notice what's the last word of the psalm that's lost a little bit in the English, but what's the last word in the Hebrew, Ben?
Odecha.
Right.
I will thank you.
Which is, I will thank you. So that's the one word that Debbie Friedman uses in Hebrew in her setting is odeka, I will thank you. And that's very powerful that that's the end of this, the kind of the summation of the whole psalm is in that final word. And so Debbie, by using that word as the one Hebrew word, and you'll hear it again when we listen to it at the end, listen to that, she's focusing on that expression of gratitude. And the psalm ends in Hebrew with that. In English, it's lost a little bit by saying, my thanks I give to you forever. I'm not so, because I really like that emphasis. And by the way, this pronunciation of this last word in Hebrew is a little complicated. So you heard that I said it odeka, so you'll notice there is a dagesh, which is very unusual, right? Because usually it's a cha, you don't add that, but there is a dagesh, so it's odeka, which is a whole long explanation, which we'll skip for right now. But listen to it when we hear Debbie's singing of this. Listen for her emphasis. She's emphasizing the power of gratitude by using that Hebrew word in her setting. Okay, let's go to the top. Yes, so this is so again, we overall look at the architecture, 13 verses. This is Tehillim, the Perek 30, the 30th chapter of the book of Psalms. And the superscription is unusual. This is the first time we've seen this superscription. And notice this, that Mizmor and LeDavid are separated. There's lots written about this because that's a very unusual superscription. You know, usually we have Mizmor LeDavid, Mizmor Shir LeDavid, something where the song is part of David. And the way that Levi handles that is by, he says, a psalm, a dedication song for the house of David. So he's explaining the LeDavid is about the house of David, not the Psalm of David. What's the house of David? So often this is seen as a psalm for those who look at all the psalms historically being related to David himself, as being related to when David finished the building of the Beit HaMikdash, of the tabernacle that David built. And by the way, this psalm is often done on Hanukkah itself. The word Chanukat Habayit, dedication song, is like the word Hanukkah. So this psalm is often the psalm for Hanukkah itself. Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit LeDavid, a psalm, a dedication song for the house of David. You'll see different people alter, for instance, says psalm, comma, song for the dedication of the house, comma, for David. So not strictly saying it's about the house for David. There's a lot of questions about where the commas and colons and punctuation goes. Remember, biblical Hebrew had 0 punctuation. So where we put the punctuation is a form of interpretation. All right, verse 2. I don't have my reading glasses, so I'm going to actually read from my text because it's hard to see the screen for me. So verse 2. I will raise you high, Adonai. What's the word for I will raise you? So it's the resh, mem is the shoresh. The aleph is the imperfect, I will, or I am doing, or I will, to raise up you, yud he vav he, ki, because you have pulled me, dalid lamed he is the shoresh, dilitani, you have pulled me, like pulled me out of the water, pulled me, schlepped me along. Now, this is important. Velo samachta oivali. Now, what is the word Samakhtami there? What is this word Samakhta? So it looks a lot like Simcha, right? For joy or happiness, like Simchat Torah, Beit Simchat Torah, Chag Sameach. So you have not let my enemies, oivai, remember oyev is one of the words for the enemies, along with Rasha or Ra or Sonaim. You have not made my enemies have happiness over me, Lee, which is a very interesting thing to be grateful for. Yud He Vav He, verse 3. Yud He Vav He, whatever Yud He Vav He is, the Holy One, my God, Shivati Elecha Vitir Pa'eni. Oh God, my God, comma, I am calling to you, I'm reaching out to you, and you have healed me. Reish Pei Aleph is the Shoresh. Rofeh is a doctor. Refuah Shlema is a complete healing. Refuah is a healing. You have healed me. This is always so powerful to hear Debbie sing this because she suffered so much from physical illnesses. Yud He Vav He, 4. You have He'alita, brought me up. This is like aliyah or la'alot, to come up. You have brought min sha'ol. We've come across this word sha'ol, meaning some kind of afterlife. Hell is often used in English, but you'll notice a lot of translators use the word Sheol because they don't want you to get the Christian imagery in your head. Some kind of Sheol, we don't know what it means exactly. Interesting, it looks like it's similar to the word for question, nafshi, my. Now notice Levi says for nefesh, body and spirit. We've talked about nefesh in the Bible as soul is not probably accurate. There was no separation. So instead of, it could be my life, Levi says body and soul. You have brought up from body and soul, my body and soul from Sheol. Now, then in the biblical parallelism, second phrase of verse 4, we have the word pit again. See, we have that word bor is parallel with Sheol. And remember in Psalm 28, we saw the word pit. We've encountered it before, talked about being brought down, bottoming out, very similar, that sense of being really as far down as you go. And the experience of Yud He Vav He is being lifted up, being, you have kept me alive, that I should not descend into that place. Verse 3. I'm going to hold off on questions and stuff to get through a few verses so we just cover. And as you know, of course, we'll get into, we're up to verse 5. We'll get into other interpretations of all of these things as we travel through the different translations. Verse 5 is the first place we see in this psalm a reference to music and singing. And over and again in the Psalms, as you've remembered from other Psalms we've looked at, singing, music, giving voice is a very critical and very connected to gratitude, to expressing praise, to expressing the wow part of life, to expressing the thanks part of life. So Zamru, sing to Yud He Vav He, Chasidav, all those who, this is the same word as Chasidim or Chasid, to followers, all those who are followers. V'hodu lezecher kodsho, and give thanks. This verse is found in various places in liturgy. And give thanks, lehodot, give thanks lezecher kodsho, to remember, or just holy, zecher in biblical Hebrew can also mean presence. And give thanks lezecher kodsho, to either remember holiness or to be aware of holiness. 6. Ki rega be'apo chayim birtzono, for there is a moment, be'apo, it literally means in the nostril or in the nose, but that's a way of saying anger. There's a moment of your anger, but in contrast, but chayim, rega be'apo, a moment, rega is literally like rega, a minute of anger, b'chayim birtzono, but a lifetime of being in your favor. And this next line I've used several times in many different sermons. Be'erev yalin bechi ulaboker rina. In the evening, there might be crying, but in the morning, but joy comes in the morning. You might have heard this. This is a very, very famous line from the Psalms. The joy comes in the morning. That's from this line. 7. Va'ani amarti b'shalvi. As for me, I would say, here he says prosperous. Okay, I'm not going to focus on that. Bal emot le'alom. I will never be emot. I will never be shaken up. Sorry about I don't have to turn this off, the beeping here. 8. Yud He Vav He, in your will or in your will, he'emadta. This is like the word amida, ayin mem dalid is the shoresh. This is to make it establish or to stand. You will establish a stronghold on my, Oz is stronghold, on leharari, on my mountain. Histarta, from the lahastir, the verse 8. Lahastir is to hide, like the name Esther from the book of Esther is hidden. Or lahastir panecha, al tastir panecha, is don't hide your face from me. This is when your face is hidden from me. In other words, if God's presence is known both in being fully aware of God's presence and then moments of feeling God's absence, then I will feel terrified. And this is the biblical way of talking about feeling God's absence, that God's face is hidden from us. Doesn't mean God isn't there. It means in some way, God's presence is hidden. 9, Elecha, to you, Yud He Vav He Ekra, to you I will call. Ve'el Adonai et Hanan, and to you, God, I will beseech, I will plead. 10, Ma betza b'dami, what profit is there in my going down, in my blood going down? And here we see in the afar is dust, to plunging down. Shema Adonai v'choneni, heye ozer li. You're going to hear this a lot in Slichot on Saturday night. Listen, please, God, listen to me. I am pleading. Choneni, show me chen. Chen is grace. Show me graciousness. Show me graciousness. Adonai heye ozer li. Adonai, be ozer, a help to me. Help me. Very much the help and thanks. And then verse 12, you will change. Lahafachta, it means to turn or change. Change my mourning. Mispadi is mourning. Lahaspid, this is my mourning, M-O-U-R-N. My so the same word, by the way, hesped is a eulogy. You have turned my mourning, my crying, into some kind of dance. We're going to leave that for now. Pitachta, you have opened up my saki. Sak is a sack, literally like sack, what is it called? Sack and cloth, you know, sackcloth, that's it. And you have now, here's the word joy again. Remember we saw joy, simcha, back at the beginning of the psalm? In the beginning of the psalm, we said, don't let my enemies have joy from me and rejoice, feel glad looking at but here, what's the difference? You, Holy One, have given me joy. And 13, lema'an, so that, and here we again have the word for song, which is of course the same word for mizmor or psalm. I will not be silent. I will not be silent. Yud He Vav He Adonai, my God, forever. Odeka, I will give thanks. I will be full of gratitude. Okay, so that's a fast track over burlap rice bags. Thank you for that, Monica. So that's a first quick overview of this Psalm 30, and we'll keep studying this for the next few days, but a couple of comments before we go to hear another Debbie Friedman version. Cantor Nimi.
Yeah, two things. First off, this is one of my favorite Psalms, and I'm a huge fan of Debbie's setting of those last few verses in the English as well. But I'm so struck by the use of that word "rina," that joyous song in connection with the morning. I feel like I've seen that kind of pairing in other Psalms too. There's another song that has like Aranen la boker, I will sing to the morning. And so I don't know, something about this idea of joyous song in the morning, it makes me think of bird song, you know, something like along those lines. And then in the last, I've always known the translation, you know, you've girded me with joy, or you've however Debbie translates it, you've helped me with joy, but that it's this idea of if joy can be an act of resilience, what it means for God to actually gird us as one is girded before going into battle, which is often the sense of that verb in other places of being girded with joy. Nice. As our armor.
I love that image of the joy being, yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, can you find the lyrics for the Debbie Friedman? Cantor Nimi, can you find
I'm sure I could pull that up pretty quickly.
Yeah,
not a problem.
That'd be interesting, but right before we listen to it again, to look at how she does it. Great, thank you. Lori Krotman?
Oh,
Should
yeah.
we leave the text up there? Is that helpful for people to have the text up there?
You know, I'm kind of looking at the Safaria text because
okay.
And line 10, now it's probably just because I'm not familiar with the Psalms, but I really appreciate that this is the first time I've heard the psalmist say, what's to be gained by going down, by being in the pit? And, you know, what's the point of, you know, and most of the Psalms seem to say, oh, I'm in the pit, or here I am, I'm stuck down here. But this was the first affirmative thing that I've noticed. It says what's to be gained from that,
Yeah.
you know. So I appreciated
Yeah,
that.
it does exist in Jewish prayer and in Jewish philosophy, kind of arguing with God. Okay, so I can't praise you if I'm dead, right? It's like
Right.
that's good. Thank you, Ben.
This comment about I can't praise you if I'm dead, we had it also in Psalm 6, verse 6.
Yes, excellent. Yes.
I want to comment about verse 7, which seems so contemporary. On a personal level, I've experienced it many times that when things are going well, I don't expect them not to continue going well.
Yep.
And yet it happens over and over again.
Yes, that is so profound. Absolutely true, Ben. I agree with you. Susan Stein?
Hi, I don't know whether this has been brought before. I'm really struck in this psalm by what I perceive as a real strong masculinity and a real strong, I don't know, the use of the word enemies, the word blood is used twice in this psalm. It doesn't seem like the Lamentations, I speak from my own experience of, like, let's say a high-strung Jewish lesbian, but of a man maybe going off to battle, you know, and were these psalms used as to sort of rally the troops? Because so often this just seems militaristic to me. And it really strikes me.
That's interesting because there are some psalms that I feel are quite militaristic. This isn't the one that does that for me, so I'm very intrigued by that. So psalms have been used in all different kinds of settings. I think I talked last summer when we were exploring Psalm 27, that the night before all the rabbis in St. Augustine, Florida, gathered to do a civil disobedience to support voting rights in St. Augustine, Dr. Martin Luther King gathered them around and recited Psalm 27 with them to strengthen them for facing the violence of doing civil disobedience in the Jim Crow South. So for sure, the Psalms get used all the way to get girded up. That's interesting. The question is whether enemies and all the other references, as I've said before, all the Psalms can be read as external and all the Psalms can be read as internal. In which way do we have, enemies that are inside of each of us that present us with obstacles and battles inside of us that we have to fight, so I think it's open to interpretation.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Allison.
Okay. Hi, Rabbi.
Hi. See you, Allison.
Okay. I'm looking at the Mitsuda.
Yeah.
And when you were talking at the beginning about the various, the David and the placement of the commas and all of that, Mitsuda says the song for the inauguration of the temple by David. And it just seems like even they are nuanced, they are still different.
Yeah, it's completely open to interpretation because that punctuation issue. So that's why what I said is that traditionally this is read as a psalm that David recited at the inauguration of the temple itself. But of course, David,
And my other question.
Of course, David didn't build the temple, right? So then the commentators debate what that means. Solomon built the temple, so some people say that David wrote it, and Solomon sang it. So it's a little bit of a stretch, but yeah.
And by David. My other question is on 4. I'm going back to the shoal thing, and I prefer your of what you said, not really knowing what the shoal represents, but it's definitely a negative, right? It's not a good place to be.
I'd say biblically it's a negative. Yep.
Yeah. So in the Mitsuda, again, it does refer to the lower world, which made me, which thinks more Christian-like, or what we were saying before is not quite, unless that's what you'll say is a stretch too.
No, I think in traditional Judaism, the concept there is, so there's the world in which we live. Like we talk about yeshiva shalmala, the yeshiva that's up in the heavens, and yeshiva shalmata, and the yeshiva of the lower worlds. So lower worlds has a generic sense of not being in the heavens. So whether that means literally below the earth level or not, I think that is probably pretty Christian. I think Judaism lifts it a little bit in a fuzzier place. All right, we are at 10:45. So great questions and comments, and we will be diving into this psalm, continuing tomorrow. But now we're going to hear, all right, thank you very much. We have to hear the lyrics for Debbie's song, and we're going to hear Sam and Joyce. But if we could, and the lyrics are in the chat. So you can see how Debbie wrote the words using the psalm, and listen for the one time she uses the Hebrew word, the only time.
Turn my mourning into dancing, so that my soul might sing to you, so that my soul sing to you, and it not be still. You turn my mourning into dancing, so that my soul might sing to you, so that my soul sing to you, and it not be still. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh Deka. Now I sing praises to the Holy One, who lifts me up when I have fallen, and I cry to you to heal me, and you have answered all my prayers. Now I sing praises to the Holy One, who lifts me up when I have fallen, and I cry to you to heal me, and you have answered all my prayers. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh Deka. I ask that you be gracious and hear me, Adonai. I have called to you to help me, and you've supported me with joy. I ask that you be gracious and hear me, Adonai. I have called to you to help me, and you've supported me with joy. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh God, my God, forever I will thank you. Oh Deka, oh Deka, oh Deka. Oh
Okay, I think we can turn that off. That was, I think we can turn this off. We'll put that, Tosh, could you put that on the Facebook page so people can listen to that and to the Debbie Friedman singing it herself, so you can get to know Debbie. But thank you, everybody. We are having class tomorrow, so we'll continue with Psalm 30. I think I don't think we'll continue with Levi. I think we got enough of his and to begin with, and tomorrow we'll do Fisher. And we'll see if we can do more than that, but tomorrow Fisher. Okay, everybody? So see everybody tomorrow. Class regular. Our retreat was moved to the afternoon, so class is happening tomorrow. Okay, everybody? Have Have a wonderful day.